Salut everyone, Air Max here. I've been doing a lot of benchmark for the last week and a half. And there is something I kind of like discovered last week. And I wanted to share it with you guys because it's pretty dramatic. And you will see nobody is safe. And when I say nobody, the AMD GPU user, they are not safe. The Nvidia user, they are not safe. Nobody is safe. So let's get into it. As always, let's start with a little bit of context. Last week, Black Myth Wukong benchmark tool was released. And this benchmark tool is actually awesome because it's free and it gives you the opportunity to test before the launch of the actual game if your rig is solid enough to run the game. So I think it was a pretty nice initiative from the dev. And obviously I want to thank them for that, but it's such a good experience to, you know, bench the game even before buying. It's like, what a great tool. Anyway, so I got the tool and you know me running the latest like CachyOS bleeding edge distro and my 1490. I was like, I need to see how much FPS I'm going to squeeze out of this game before buying it. And what happened is like I made the test and I was kind of like, this look like it could be the new Crisis, right? And my first thought was to share my result with my community. And one member of my community, Vexi, if you look at the video, hello, he shared his result with the same graphic card, but with a different CPU. I own a 5950X 3D and he owned a 7800X 3D, which is like creme de la creme of the CPU as we speak for gaming. I look at the result and I was like, dude, we exactly have the same result, like exactly the same. And we own both the same graphic card. So I look at those results and I was like, man, that doesn't make sense, right? Like something is odd. And it kind of like triggered me. It triggered me in a way where I was like, something is not right. And so I start to dig into it. So I did a lot of testing on Linux. I did a lot of testing with the settings. So this game proposes DLSS, FSR, XeSS when it comes to upscaling. He also proposed frame gen from AMD, you know, the 3.1. It does not propose the DLSS frame gen from Nvidia because it's not compatible yet. However, what I noticed is like the actual like frame rate and average FPS, they were not great. So I was wondering, is it related to Linux? Would I have like better experience or better average on Windows? So you know me, I did reinstall Windows. Make me quite upset to say the least, but I had to reinstall it. I didn't have it installed for a long time. But anyway, so I reinstalled Windows and run the bench. And there, big surprise. Before we jump into the bench themselves, I want to show you my hardware configuration. Okay, so I'm going to put the screen there like that you can look at it. I'm going to also like mention the driver which have been used was the latest driver from Nvidia on both Windows and Linux. Everything is optimized. And to prove my point, just to give you another idea, I did compare my benchmark result on Windows versus the benchmark result from Hardware Unboxed, which are like kind of a reference when it comes to benchmarking. And with my CPU, which is 4 years older than the one they used, I had better performance on Windows. So my point being, I'm not CPU limited, I'm not GPU limited, and my benchmark overall were top of the class. Okay, I just want to put that out there before someone writes in the comment, oh, your CPU is 4 years old, that's why your benchmark are not good. No. Okay, troll, you stop there right now. All right, anyways, now the image I'm going to put there is the actual setting within the game. Like that is going to give you an idea of the setting I use. So now when it comes to the game settings itself, because all those benchmarks are going to be based on Black Myth Wukong benchmark tool, the only variable which are going to change in those benchmarks are the upscaling method, whether it's DLSS or FSR, and the use of frame gen whether it's the frame gen from AMD or the frame gen from Nvidia, I'm going to do those bench through both Windows and Linux with my hardware Nvidia card. And on top of that, I gathered benchmark from the AMD user within the Discord I'm using, and also some of my friends will help me like share those numbers. So like that, we're gonna have a really good vision of what is actually happening with this game, but also like outside of this game, because you will see some trends are pretty dramatic. And the last point, I know I'm making it longer before we go into the benchmark, but last point, which is super important. I've been doing benchmark for the last almost like 3 years on both Linux and Windows. What I notice is that most of the time, we always get the same result. And with my hardware, what I notice is that there is always a discrepancy between like -10 or +10% of performance between Windows and Linux, whether it's one direction or another. I'll give you an example. If I play Valheim native on Linux, I will have 10% more FPS than if I played on Windows. Same for a lot of other sandbox games like that, like Minecraft or whatever. If I played other games which go through Proton, normally I should be around like the same performance as on Windows, but sometimes I will be like maximum like 10% under the performance on Windows. So this will give you kind of like the gap of like difference of performance I will get between Windows and Linux. And the second point, which is super important within this, we say like benchmark overall, is that my minimum 1% lows are always higher on Linux no matter what. So the experience overall will be better. I would have a smoother experience on Linux because the frame time is more regular. And that, if you look at my previous video, it has been consistent for the last 3 years. So now you get the picture, right? Like I didn't feel like doing benchmark anymore because there is nothing new. It's always the same thing. 1% lows always higher on Linux, and then a variable, of performance between +10 and -10, depending on the game that I run on Linux. So, I didn't want to do bench just for seeing the same time over and over again. So now let's get into the number. And you will see like my graphs are not the best, but I think they're going to be good enough for you to understand what I've been seeing while benchmarking those games. So the first thing you're going to notice is that if you compared the Windows performance versus the Linux performance overall, you will have a decrease in performance, which is like super drastic, whatever mode you are using. There is only one mode where you kind of like find the actual, I would say like trend I will have on most of the other game. And it will be with the usage of FSR and FrameGen without RTX. So if you use this mode, you will notice that the difference between Windows and Linux is negligible. It's literally the same, and we still have the same trend where we have the lowest FPS, which is way higher than on Windows. So it means like a smoother experience here. So this will be the only win from Linux over Windows. And I will be fine with that if the difference in terms of performance between Windows and Linux for this game was not as drastic. So if you look at the actual like RTX result, you will see that compared to Windows, you will lose average, like in average, like 43% here with no frame gen. And here 46% again with no frame gen. So when frame gen is not involved, it's like 46%. And when there is a frame gen involved, it will be 26%, which is like kind of like what you are supposed to gain with the frame generation. But the overall idea is like there's a decrease moving from Windows to Linux with ray tracing is just stupid. And more to that in the next part of the video for the AMD user, because you're going to be surprised there. But this is insane, right? Because you would expect maybe like 5-10%, but here we are at 43, 46%. The takeaway here, in my opinion, is like when I've been doing my benchmark with ray tracing, I really focus on Cyberpunk. I focus on Cyberpunk thinking that this is the best game to, like make those bench and see really what type of performance issue we could have. I tried to play Alan Wake 2 on Linux, but I just could not play it. Like the game was rendering, etc., but the performance was atrocious. And at the time, I thought it was an Alan Wake 2 issue, right? Because if I have two games with a heavy usage of RTX and path tracing, and one is working and the other one is not working, I was thinking, yeah, that's an issue related to the game. But now we have the new kid on the block, Black Myth Wukong, who kind of like use the same technology. You can see here that it is not a game issue related anymore. It's more an issue related to ray tracing in general. You will see it's important in the next part what I'm going to announce on that. But the idea is like here, activating ray tracing just destroys the gaming experience. And it's pretty bad because you have to think it this way. If you are using DLSS with your Nvidia card and you are on Windows, you're going to average like 72 FPS without frame gen, which is fair. But when you move to Linux, you arrive at a point where you just can't play the game anymore because it's not even able to run at 60 Hz. You won't reach those 60 FPS that you are able to reach on Windows, which is like, let me tell you, like this is bad. Okay, this doesn't look good for Linux. On top of that, we don't have the help of like frame generation here, because if we had DLSS frame gen, maybe we could go, a little bit higher there and have an experience which is kind of okay. But as you can see, like this is not the case. We don't have it yet. And if you look at the other upscaling method, FSR, well, same story, right? So with FSR, by default, you will have less FPS than DLSS on Windows, and you have exactly the same approach there in terms of like upscaling performance. You're gonna be a little bit under, like quite a bit actually, on Linux when you use FSR. But at the end of the day, you go from a game which is like kind of like playable on Windows with a different upscaler to a game which is not playable at all on Linux here with RTX. So here again, it's kind of like worrisome, right? You can discard the fact it's related to DLSS or FSR. We have the same trend whether you are using one upscaler or another. Now, if you look at the number without ray tracing, here we are in a ballpark on Linux where you can play, okay? Even if you lose almost 20% of the performance there, and still have a lowest, which is way higher. Again, the same trend here, where your lowest is actually higher here. So it does work with my actual finding, but it's 20% lower than what you would get on Windows, which is way higher than what you are supposed to get. So my point here is like the loss of performance versus the other game I've been testing earlier is way higher. And so we can just not say it's related to ray tracing. Because the way I think, and you're gonna tell me in the comment below, like if I missed something important there. But if I prove that whether you use ray tracing or not, you have a big decrease between Linux and Windows, which is like between 18% and 46%. So I would say like between 20% and 50%. I kind of prove the point that ray tracing is amplifying the loss of performance, but it's not the only reason we lose performance there. So again, I don't want to get deeper in the number. You've seen them here. Like it doesn't look great. Now you're gonna tell me, Air Max, this is a problem related to Nvidia. Us on AMD, we don't have this issue. And I will tell you, fair, right? Well, it's actually not exactly the same story, but we are really not far from the actual scenario with the Nvidia card. And let me show you. If you look at the actual performance without ray tracing, you will be aligned with what you normally get with AMD driver on Linux, which is the same experience on Windows or sometimes a little bit higher. So here we have plus 3% of increase without frame gen here. And with frame gen, you can see that the performance is the same with a 6% increase for the FPS low. So the experience there without ray tracing is the same. Now, look at this. Look at this, guys. If you activate RTX, you will see that on Windows, you will get a whopping 46 FPS average with those settings. But when you switch to Linux with the same settings, look at this. Minus 50%, minus 56%, minus 57%. So here, it kind of like gives us another story here. Story is that, yes, without RTX, the AMD GPU, they perform likely the same or a little bit better on Linux, which is great. You activate RTX, same decrease in terms of performance than Nvidia. That will be the only difference. So here you can see that even the AMD card with the use of ray tracing, they have a problem. And you will see I have my little theory about it. We're going to talk about it in the conclusion, but we have some serious issue overall with ray tracing with all the card. And I would say like Nvidia, on top of that, has a serious problem related to the DirectX 12 game. Yes, I said it. DirectX 12 game. So let me explain. I found those benchmarks from another YouTuber on Linux. I'm going to put the link in the description below of this screenshot I took. And you can see that all over the place, he has some decrease in terms of performance on DirectX 12. And then I start to dig into the Nvidia forum, and I noticed that there is some thread about how DirectX 12 game perform badly when running on Linux. So now what we need to do is just like step back and kind of have like a wider perspective towards those issues I just mentioned. So on one hand, you have Nvidia, which is directly impacted on Linux with DirectX 12. And I couldn't see this trend because the game I've been really benchmarking for the last 2 years using DirectX 12 was Cyberpunk. And Cyberpunk was never impacted this way. And now I can see more and more DirectX 12 game coming to the market, even without activating ray tracing. I can see like the gap of performance between those games, between Linux and Windows while using an Nvidia card is just too big. And I had to share this with you because as a new user, as a new, I would say like Linux user, if you want to ditch Windows and you are really into this type of game, you're going to take a big dip in type of performance, which is sad. So with my 4090, I will get the type of, performance I would get on Windows with a 4070, which is fine, right? But like, it's just showing you what type of performance loss you're gonna get. And when I noticed that, I had to make a video about it because this channel is about transparency and also to share my findings with you guys. Even if I'm a big Linux, I would say like a lover. Can I say that? It sounds weird, but like you get the idea. I need to share that with you. Something is odd. The second point is really related to both of the manufacturer actually, whether it's AMD or Nvidia. When you play with RTX, you're gonna have a big decrease of performance versus Windows. And this decrease is quite of the same. Actually, the decrease with the AMD card is even higher than the decrease with the Nvidia card. And this is something that nobody ever talk about. Like when you talk about Linux, everybody is like, yeah, go AMD is great, blah, blah, blah. And when they talk about ray tracing, most of the posts I've read and also the conversation I have with my buddies, they're like, oh yeah, ray tracing just doesn't work on AMD. Which is partially true and partially false, right? Because it does work. It doesn't work as much as an Nvidia card. Maybe it's not playable, but you can still see the trend here. The performance is divided by 2 when you move from Windows to Linux with an AMD card and ray tracing. So right now, some of you guys are sitting in the back and be like, hey, you know what? I don't care. My games are working and stuff and blah, blah, blah. And my GPU is working. But I don't think this is the right attitude there. It's not the right attitude because moving forward, we're going to have new game. And most of those games, they're going to be running on DirectX 12, which means like the more we go in time, the less games are going to be as performant as before. And the full trend won't be what I said earlier in the video, which is like, 10% uplift or downlift between the two operating systems and always average lowest higher on Linux. It won't be that anymore. The new trend when we move to DirectX 12 is going to be big decrease in ray tracing. And for the Nvidia user, big decrease of performance, like huge decrease of performance moving from, Windows to Linux. So now you know, right? Like now you know. And I said it. Okay, maybe some of you guys said it, but they were not, willing to say, yes, my AMD card were not as good as on Windows when the ray tracing is on. Nobody said it. So me, I'm saying it. This is where we are at right now. This is an objective screenshot of the situation today in late August 2024. Now, how do we move on from there? I think the first thing we really need to understand is that what are the cause of those issues? Like, is it software? Is it hardware? Because it could be hardware, right? Is it related to the driver? From my little analysis there, I can tell it's not related to the driver, whether it's on Linux, on Windows, or Nvidia, or AMD. Like, this is not a driver problem. My fault is that it is related to Proton and the way Proton actually translates DirectX 12 on Nvidia card, first thing. So there is an issue there. And the second one is more related to ray tracing. Now, obviously, when you think about what Proton is and how it has been developed by Valve, it kind of makes sense, right? It kind of makes sense because the Steam Deck is the reason why we have Proton, mostly. And the Steam Deck doesn't care about RTX and doesn't care about Nvidia, right? It's AMD and all the work has been based on FSR. It uses FSR heavily to render the graphic really well on the platform. And so it kind of makes sense that FSR is always winning no matter what. But, like FSR, it's good on a small screen. FSR on a big screen with high resolution compared to DLSS, it's a tough one, right? But my point is like maybe Valve employee and Valve itself, like as a company, doesn't want to invest too much towards the development or anything related to Nvidia. Could be the case. But me, what I can tell you right now is that on Nvidia, there is a huge will to move forward. Like we have been having beta driver every 2 or 3 weeks for the last 2 or 3 months. It's just pop up. So we have Wayland, which is working really well right now. We have multi-screen VRR, which is almost there. I know from correct source, actually from GitHub, that DLSS frame gen is going to be implemented really soon within Proton, right? So we have a huge advance and a huge will to advance for NVIDIA too. But this is, in my opinion, the elephant in the room. Before moving even further, I do believe that NVIDIA need to fix it. And AMD, if you look at AMD and the community, they were able to fix it. There is no difference in terms of performance within DirectX 12 game on the AMD GPU, which is just awesome. So why can't we go there? So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put this video on the NVIDIA forum. I'm gonna put the link in the description below, and I'm gonna let you do what you have to do, chat. If you are, in this position where you have NVIDIA card and you are getting it on Linux, or if you are on Windows still and you want to move to Linux, maybe it's time to let your voice, going through. Maybe they are not even aware of the problem. Maybe, they don't know. But if we ask them to look into it, I think NVIDIA is going to be able to whether fix it on their end, or better, maybe check with Valve and also like the Proton dev if something can be done, because I know they're working all together. So again, I'm going to put the link down there, and I really hope we're going to be able to, you know, fix those issues. And same with ray tracing, right? Like ray tracing, we could do some type of post on, VKG3D on GitHub and just explain everything. I'm going to do one. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to put the link in the description below too. And like that, we're gonna see if, it can be solved. But with the community, not only complaining, right, but also like giving information, because maybe they need more information. Maybe they have a lack of like data to actually solve those issues. So, I really hope that as a community, we're going to be able to help them. Now, how to conclude this little like semi-conclusion? Listen, I've been playing the game this morning on stream. And man, it was fun, but I still think like I'm missing out by not using Windows, and it kind of sucks. And I would say I will be reinstalling Windows for this game. I've been reinstalling Windows for Alan Wake 2 because I wanted to have the full experience. And I made a video actually about it. I think it was like maybe 1 year ago, where I explained like we need to do something about it. And I thought it was related to Alan Wake, like the dev of Alan Wake. But now I notice it's not the game of Alan Wake. It's actually more general. And there is some things that need to be done. But until then, if I want to, take advantage of my hardware, well, I'm going to take a SSD, put Windows on it, and just use it for this specific game. It kind of sucks. I won't lie to you, it really sucks. But that's how I feel about it. That's how I feel about it. So, yeah. Guys, that's it. That's all for this video. Man, I know it sounds like it's a little bit, like a big defeat for Linux gamer out there. But I believe that this is a small battle, and we're gonna win the big war on top of it. This is the idea, okay? So this is a loss on this battle, but we might like be able to, stand up and get back into the Linux dream. Guys, thank you very much for watching again. Thanks to all the members of La Crème de la Crème Club who support this channel financially. I'm thinking about the member on YouTube, but also the one on Patreon. Guys, you are the best. Thank you very much for your help. We need this financial help to continue to do what we are doing here. Yeah, that's it. That's all for this video. Thanks again, and see you in the next one. Bisous, bisous.